the parallel sessions. You are in session number 5, and this is a focus on co-creating research with the sub-theme of advancing clean water for Indigenous communities. Just a quick couple of housekeeping items. So we're going to use the question and answer feature that you find in the toolbar. If you have any comments or questions or points of discussion that you would like us to pull for the group discussion near the end, please feel free to do that. Today's session is being recorded. We're not sharing slides with participants, but you'll be able to find the archive embedded within the event website. You can also watch closed captionings. That's also found in the toolbar in the bottom. And of course, feel free to join the conversation on social media. Just a quick note about code of conduct. Our whole Global Water Futures event is following the guidelines of trying to promote an inclusive and friendly and space for everybody to share their stories and their experiences. And I have no doubt that everybody participating here today will provide a positive space for everybody to do that. So I would like to pass this off to Michelle Johnson-Jennings, who is our gracious chair today, and she will introduce the session and the panelists that you'll be hearing from.
Okay, thank you, Stephanie. So helito, sa chapaya Michelle Johnson-Jennings, mijaini inkishopokona, chakta siya hoke. I join you here from Treaty 6 territory and want to give respect to the First Nations people of these lands, as well as the Métis, and welcome us all into today's session, as well as paying respect to the places from which you tune in today and the ancestors of those lands as well. So in my language, we would say ayok ponchi, or welcome to the place where we'll be engaging in love, laughter, or just a good space with one another. I'd like to introduce our panel today, which is co-creating research to advance access to clean water in Indigenous communities. I do wholeheartedly believe this is a very important area, very critical for us to discuss, and we have some wonderful panelists with us here today. And before I introduce the knowledge keeper, Ms. Judy Da Silva, I will actually begin with just a quote from one of my long-time mentors, Linda Tuiwai Smith, who's Maori. And she's really done a lot of work in indigenizing the academy and looking at how research can really serve Indigenous communities. And when I think about the importance of clean water, there's not a better place that we could put our efforts, because water is so dear and so sacred. You know, I always grew up believing that water touches all of us. And every time we touch the water, we need to think about the 7 generations forward who will also take that water in. As she says, as far as research and the Indigenous people, in these conservative times, the role of an Indigenous researcher, and indeed of other researchers, should be committed to producing research knowledge that documents social injustice, that recovers subjugated knowledges, that helps create spaces for the voices of the silenced to be expressed and listened to. And that challenges racism, colonialism, and oppression. And indeed, it is risky business. And so I want to commend all of you for being here today and for engaging in this critical area of injustice. When we don't have community members who have access to clean water, this is indeed a great injustice, not just for the community, but for all in our society today. We will begin. I want to tell you a little bit about our knowledge keeper. She should be on here in the next few minutes. So give me just a little bit of time to go over her background, and that way when she does arrive, we'll be able to transition over. So we'll be joined by Judy Da Silva, who is an award-winning advocate for Indigenous rights and ecological justice. She is an elder, a Grassy Narrows community member, and a mother to 5 children. They help her to have the positive energy to continue to look for justice and for the solution to the mercury poisoning of their river system in Grassy Narrows and Mother Earth. She has been awarded the Michael Satter Peace Prize in Germany, the Extraordinary International Activist Award from Human Rights Watch in Toronto, the Art Manual Environmental Award, as well as an honorary doctorate from Wilfrid Laurier University, a recognition of her lifelong work to advocate for her community members for environmental protection using peaceful and nonviolent direct actions. She currently works in the band office of her community as an environmental health coordinator. So it'll be really wonderful to hear from Judy when she is able to sign in. She has done obviously great work. As we're waiting for her, we might just pass it on to the chair. I will first go through the introductions for the other members at the panel today. I think you'll see we have a great lineup today of Gary Carrier, who's president of Cumberland House Fishermen's Cooperative. We also have with us today Tim Jardine, who's an associate professor of the School of Environment Sustainability at the University of Saskatchewan. And we have Anthony Blair Drever Johnston, who is over special projects at Mistawasis Nehiyawak, a professional affiliate with the University of Saskatchewan, community engagement specialist and School of Environment and Sustainability. And then we're also joined by Don Martin Hill, who is from the Mohawk Nation, Six Nations of the Grand River, associate professor, Department of Anthropology with McMaster University. She's also PI of the Oneganos, Indigenous Ecological Knowledge, Training, and Co-Creation of Mixed Method Tools. And so as you can see, we have a great lineup of wonderful speakers, and I think you will be quite pleased, and it seems like we're going to have lots of room for discussion. How this will go is that we'll actually begin with Judy as she arrives, but then we'll move into our community and academic experts. And they'll each have 10 minutes to go over some of the information with us that they're going to share today. And then hopefully we'll have time to also come together and chat a little bit about this. So I'm just going to see if we happen to be joined yet by Judy. And I know, okay, so we will move on to the first speaker then, as we wait for Judy to arrive. And I'd like to begin actually with Gary Carrier as well as Tim Jardine, who will be taking the 20-minute time, but also presenting together. Oh, I'm sorry. We just were joined with Judy. Tim, would you mind if we waited for your presentation?
Of course.
Thank you so much. And Judy, if you can hear me, okay, I have already given your introduction, and we're very pleased and honored that you're joining with us today. So I will turn the floor over to you. You're okay.
Okay, thank you. Bonjour, the Ecological Grief. I'm Judy Da Silva from Grassy Narrows, and I'm sitting in the wigwam here, which represents our land protection and our water protection that we started in, well, since probably like 1995. And this is the blockade site, and we have the wigwam here, and we have a sacred fire. But as we speak, you could hear the helicopters going by. We have like forest fires all around us, and I can't make a sacred fire for safety. So I just wanted to like use that as a way of talking about how important water is to humanity, and Grassy Narrows being like in a semi-isolated reserve, we are like about, well, an hour and a half from the nearest town. And the nearest town has 10,000, no, I think it's 15,000 people. And Grassy Narrows has 800 that live on the reserve. We have been in a boil water advisory like since 2015, where we were told no consumption. And just last September that was lifted. So we've suffered through many different kinds of water problems. The main one has been mercury pollution in our water. And I wanted to differentiate that first with the boil water advisory. There are two different issues. The boil water advisory is water intake that was too close to the shoreline, and a filtration system that was not good for, like, you know, when you intake and then when you filter the water, some little micro dust came out, sediment, and then the chlorine attached itself to the sediment and it made 3 toxins that could affect the embryo. So for Grassy Narrows, like that's a fixable problem, and it's fixed now, but the mercury poisoning is still affecting us because what it is the mercury gets into the bottom feeders, which is like crayfish and little tiny fish, and then the bigger fish eat the other fish, and then we eat the fish, and then we get poisoned. I am poisoned myself, and I'm on a mercury disability. So I wanted to like talk to these people that are on the line, like to think about all these communities that live near water, like for their safety. And I know industry has the biggest blame to carry for us being poisoned, and industry is really protected by government, and they're usually licensed by government, and they, in the end, like when we are poisoned, it's usually like the Anishinaabe, Indigenous people that live with that, and like not just Grassy Narrows, but across Turtle Island. And I hear like in South Dakota, there's like uranium, and probably in Arizona, and then like the Squamish are fighting against Trans-Canada pipelines right now in BC, and they're just a small group of people. So all across, there's these Indigenous people fighting to protect water. And I wanted to remember some water protectors that have passed on, and one of them being Milton Bornadatuth. And I remember in 1990 when we went and did like a water gathering by the Old Man River in Alberta. He was saying someday water is going to be a commodity, and he said water will become like part of the world's market where they're going to sell water, and the day has come and we have to buy water in bottles. And his words came true, and many other people that have passed to protect water. And I wanted to remember those warriors, those unseen warriors that have passed on protecting water for us, for humanity. And this conference, I feel like is reaching those people that can make a difference. And which is why, like when Don Hill asked me if I could be on this, I I said, I'll speak for real. And like, I'm hoping that, that this gathering or this conference will reach out to us grassroots people that live in the front lines, that live to protect water, and someday we'll need your support to fight this big fight. One of the other things I learned working with scientists and engineers for Grassy Narrows is they said that we carry like 20% of the Earth's fresh water, and I think like all over the world it's going to be a crisis because of climate change, that fresh water will be scarce, and a lot of people will pass away from lack of water. So I feel like it's an alarm that has to go out, and that we have to take it serious about protecting water and protecting those communities that fight to protect water. Another people that I see that are very active is the Mi'kmaq in East Coast, and I see them doing water ceremonies, and I see them even during COVID times, like doing direct peaceful action, and like even during COVID, like they put themselves in the front lines to protect water. And today in Grassy Narrows, we have the boil water advisory that was lifted, but then because our people became accustomed to using bottled water, like 18-liter jugs, they're still not adapted to drinking the tap water again. So it's going to take time. We're still getting bottled water, and people are still drinking it because they've lost the trust of drinking that tap water. And as for the mercury pollution, we're starting in June 7th, more study from the wood engineers that are trying to figure out how to clean the river of 10 tons of mercury. And it seems an impossible task. And a lot of times, like our own people are scared of even the cleanup. So it's like a way of trauma or a mental way of thinking that we're losing the trust of loving our waters, our rivers, our lakes, because of the contamination that we've lived with our whole lives. So in that in itself, we need healing. And I just wanted to say thank you for listening to me. And if people want to reach out to me, I think Don Hill will have my email address, and I can send you reports and things that we're doing. I can send you those to bring you up to date. And the best place to look for about Grassy Narrows is freegrassy.net, and you can check that out and get updated about Grassy Narrows through there. So miigwech for listening to me today.
Yokoke, Judy, thank you so much for reminding us about the sacredness of water, its spirituality, and our need to maintain that spiritual sacred relationship with it. So I deeply appreciate your time and coming to us from there. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we will go ahead and return to Gary and Tim. And Tim, if you can re-upload your slides, please. And we look forward to sharing, and then we'll follow this presentation with Anthony. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. And Judy, thank you for those opening words. I'm actually, I study mercury in freshwater food webs in fish. And so I've known about Grassy Narrows for a long time. And I just want you to know that we hear you and we support you in everything that you're doing. And I really appreciate you taking the time to be with us today.
Mm-hmm.
So Gary and I are going to take you now to the Saskatchewan River Delta. It straddles the border of Saskatchewan and Manitoba at the bottom end of the Saskatchewan River. And it's another story of life downstream and some of the consequences of that. So I'll just start by saying the delta is big. It's about 10,000 square kilometers. Okay, it's huge, bigger than the Everglades. It's important, so it's very productive and diverse. It's produced fish and wildlife for generations. Has very high species diversity. It's also very complicated. Okay, so the water spreads out into a whole bunch of interconnected wetlands, but it's also vulnerable because it's downstream. And it's Gary's home, so Gary can tell you about life growing up in the Delta.
Good morning, everybody. Life growing up in the Delta, oh man, yeah, like I miss those days. This year, for the first time in 55 years or so, I didn't eat muskrat this spring. It's first time in 55 years I didn't eat muskrat. No muskrat in the Delta. It used to be a muskrat world muskrat population. So whatever, more muskrats here than the rest of the world is what I'm trying to say. And of course, the Delta is getting quieted. Like not as many birds come into the Delta. Like it's not as loud as it used to be. A lot of indicators telling us there's things going on in the Delta that the wildlife don't seem to like, and that's what me and Tim are trying to do to help out that way to find out the contaminants. I guess he does the scientific part, and I just use my traditional knowledge, and what I see in front of me is what I usually report. Like so. But anyway, the Delta is nowhere near as healthy as one they used to be when I was growing up, and then that's why we started, I guess, speaking out, because less and less wildlife in the Delta. It was the most attractive place at one time when the Europeans were heading our way. So there was a lot of attention here at one time, but they're done their purpose here, and now nobody's here. It's quiet, and you're still here. The Aboriginal people are still here trying to survive in the Delta, but it's getting harder and harder each year because of the changes and how the dams have interfered with the natural regimes and trapping a lot of sediments, forcing rivers to scar at the bottom and leaving smaller tributaries high and dry, so the wetlands from these tributaries don't no longer get the nutrients that they need to strive and continue with the aquatic life and whatnot in the plant life in these wetlands. Yeah, like so they're drying out, and we're doing whatever we can to try and prolong the Delta, and we have U of S on our side who pull it together that we can convince somebody out there that the Delta needs help. And it's very important because millions of birds depend on this place each year to come and reproduce, and the Delta is shrinking every year. So that's all I have to say for now. I'll take up all your time, Tim.
That's okay, it's your time. So yeah, just to, I guess, reiterate what Gary was saying, the 1900s were not very kind to the Delta. So all the upstream changes that have occurred. So water demand from cities, for example, there's about 3 million people living upstream of the Delta now. Water demand for irrigation, for agriculture, largely in southern Alberta and soon to be in southern Saskatchewan as well. Industrial activities like pulp and paper mills, for example, that were releasing contaminants into the river, as well as a chloralkali plant that released mercury to the river. And then finally, a big one, flow regulation by dams. So storing water to be used to generate hydropower and altering flow patterns through the Delta. And with the dams, as Gary mentioned, another thing that happens there is they trap sediment. So naturally, sediment would have been moving downstream, coming off via erosion in the foothills, the Rocky Mountains, and eventually being deposited in the delta. And sediment can carry good stuff and bad stuff. The delta used to get that good rich sediment with lots of nutrients that built and fueled the delta wetlands. But now what we have is a situation where that sediment is stuck in reservoirs upstream. And so one of the students on the project, Asa, has been speaking with land users and elders to try and understand some of this complexity. And I'll just draw your attention to sort of the right-hand side of this diagram that I have up. And these are all observations from those elders and land users, including Gary, what they've seen, and some of the consequences that have occurred because of this loss of sediment. So because there's very little sediment coming out of the reservoirs, it means that the river will basically start to scour the bottom. It'll pick up that sediment where it can find it. And what that means is the channels are getting deeper and deeper. The main river channel is getting deeper and deeper. And it's leaving some of those side channels high and dry. You get buildup of sediment at their entrances. And as a result, a lot of the wetlands off to the sides of the main channel don't get the water that they used to. And so, Gary, maybe you can talk just a little bit about what that means for some of those wetlands, including the effects of Phragmites as well.
Yeah, okay. It's just like I said, like I always use this analogy to like your heart. Your heart has arteries that help the heart to disperse the blood in your body. And when one of the arteries clog up, and if nothing is done to it, eventually you die. So that's what's happening in the delta. A lot of these smaller arteries that used to replenish these wetlands are clogging up, and that part of the delta starts to die. So there's just a pattern that's happening. It starts from the upstream near the dam and works its way down, and then less and less rivers in the delta because they keep clogging up it, because we don't have the volume of water, and then eventually, like Tim says, they build up in front, like the sediment, sand will build up and eventually clog that river right up. So and that's what's been happening. And then from there, because of less water into these wetlands, and then this invasive species called Phragmites, grows in the delta. It becomes a prime area for this invasive species. And then what it does is it grows about 10 feet, 10 to 12 feet tall. And what happens is every other plant life in the area eventually gets choked up, and eventually no longer can survive in that area. So a lot of the food source for wildlife and the birds are being choked up. So less and less food in the delta for the wildlife, and because this Phragmites is taking over the delta. So that's something that we're trying to find a way to control the Phragmites. I think there's some hope here. There's pieces of equipment Tim showed me that could work in the delta, and to take control control of the Phragmites, so other plant life will start growing back in these areas. So wildlife will have food again.
So we need more sediment for the delta. And I think we're getting close to the end of our time, so I won't spend much time on this slide, but just that we're testing the sediments, the potential sources of sediment to return to the delta. And what we're finding is that some evidence of some of these legacy chemicals, nasty stuff in these sediments. And so that's giving us pause to think about whether we would want to use them as a source of to return sediment to the river. And then finally, we'll just wrap up by saying that the Delta is a big place. It has a pretty small human population, but there's a lot of interest in the Delta from a lot of different agencies, including the U of S and others. And so our view, I think Gary would agree with this, is that partnerships are critical, that we kind of need everyone on board to try and understand and manage some of these problems that the Delta is seeing. So Gary, I'll give the last word to you on that.
Well, it's not just the Delta, like it's all the waterways in this planet, like, and then it's like, because that's the Delta is only one of the, I guess, like something that we can look at it, like if we don't, if we continue the upstream people, like farmers, to continue poisoning our waterways, like to in every spring, all their chemicals come running down the river, and it impacts everything, like, and stuff like that needs to be controlled, like, and same thing with all the mining, like, and there's a lot of stuff that comes down that river that the government allows to happen, like, and that has to stop, that has to stop, like, because why are we here today concerned about the future of our water? Because we've already recognized that the water is in trouble, and in order for us to reverse it, we need to start taking some of the problems out of the picture. And that's one of them. That is, today I'm battling with cancer. I don't know how I got it. One thing I know for sure, it wasn't cigarette, because I'm a smoker, but that's the first question I asked the doctor. No, it's not cigarette, but somehow I got cancer but a lot of these chemicals that the farmers are allowed to put into back to the river is causing cancer. There's a lot of people today in this province, from when I go with my treatments. Oh man, you guys will be surprised how many people that have cancer in this province alone. It is just one hospital I go to, and there's a lot of people with cancer. We need to do some quick research there and trying to find out what's causing these cancers. Sure, we're in a pandemic right now, like, but that doesn't stop us from focusing on other important issues and how we plague ourselves as human beings. Like I've always said that, like we're a species at risk ourselves. The human species at risk, and it's not about Aboriginal or anything like that. Like we're all human are a species at risk, and that's something that we need to get out there. I guess if more people to know about it, because if we don't get it out there, the government will continue having their way with everything. But people need to be alarmed, and there's a lot of poison in our river that's already poisoning us. All right, thank you.
Thanks for that, Gary. And thank you, Chair, for giving us a little extra time.
Well, thank you both for enlightening us about what is happening on the Delta. Very important information. And to keep things moving, again, we will have Anthony Blair-Draver Johnston up next, and then we will follow with Don Martin Hill before, and then we'll open it up to discussion. So just to remind our audience that we will have time hopefully for discussion, but feel free to use the chat box as we go along. Anthony, are you ready to go?
Hi, Tansei. Thank you. Good morning. Good afternoon. The water is bringing us together. I wish we had a campfire to gather around. I want to thank you for the opening and the words from Grassy Narrows. Our good thoughts are for your community and people. I would like to share a story of Mr. Wass's efforts to honor the water. First, I'll say that the photo on your screen, in the background, just beyond the first set of trees, is Mr. Wass's Creek that feeds into the North Saskatchewan River that visits my friend Gary in Cumberland House. The North Saskatchewan originates in the mountains of Alberta. And so all our waterways, all our watersheds are connected. Our water around the world is connected, as Gary so eloquently stated. I want to begin by my story that for me begins in the winter of 1955 and 56. There was record snowfall across the Prairie provinces. That spring, there was record runoff of water. The ground became saturated. There was high water and flooding across the Prairie provinces. Back then, my people, the Mistawas Nehiyawak, still had some connections to water, land, and sky, along with some skills and knowledge that water, land, and sky taught us. This allowed us to cope at a local level. At that time, water was talking with us, and we still partly understood what water was telling us. 50 years later, in the winter of 2005, 2006, we broke that snowfall record. And so, of course, in the spring, we broke the record for spring runoff. Again, the ground became saturated with water, and we had flooding again. A few years after 2006, from 2010 to 2015, we had extreme weather events and unusual seasons. In 2010, we had, during the spring of 2010, summer and fall, we had steady, heavy rains. During that period from 2010 to 2015, we often had early snow melt on frozen ground, which caused additional flooding. During that period from 2010 to 2015, partly because we had less connection to water, land, and sky, we had forgotten much knowledge and skills that our ancestors had that allowed us to cope and adjust to what the water and climate was doing. So in that period, 2010 to 2015, water was talking with us again, but we didn't understand what it was telling us. During that period from 2010 to 2015, we had significant infrastructure damage. We had flooded roads, flooded basements. Some households were on evacuation alert. And at that time, it may have been a wrong decision, but we had to release water from one body of water into another. We still don't know if we did some damage, some harm to that second body of water. At that time, all of our lakes and waterways, the water was at a higher level, which killed all the shoreline trees. We've since started to deal with that. And then, of course, we became concerned with the quality of our source water. At that time, dealing with daily community crises, we realized we lacked the resources, expertise, experience to
Anthony, I think we may have lost your voice. Are you still on? Okay. We will wait and see if Anthony is able to reconnect. But while we're waiting, if I could just, and I think this is wonderful information about,
Do you have,
oh, there you are. Great.
yeah, I'm here now.
Okay.
Okay, I think, again, I don't have great internet connection.
And Anthony, I think you may be cutting back out again.
Yeah, am I here now?
Yes, you are here now.
Okay, I believe I lost my internet connection when I stated that from 2010 to 2015, we realized that we lacked the expertise, experience, and resources to deal with our high water and flooding. In 2014, we gathered our neighbors, different levels of government, institutions, and non-government organizations to come to Mr. Walsh's and talk about our shared concern with high water and flooding. A result of that gathering was a project that we called Honor the Water that lasted with support from Environment Canada, but the greater amount of support came from 8 partners, some of who became friends from our 2014 gathering. During that project, simply by sharing stories about our shared efforts to honor the water, brought additional interest in resources. In 2017, after hearing our stories, the School of Environment and Sustainability at the University of Saskatchewan approached me and said, we have to find ways to work together. From that, we became connected to Global Water Futures, and in particular, the Prairie Water Project, which brought 3 research projects to Mr. Walsh's. One on water governance, a second on drainage and emergency response, and the third was on the use of storytelling. When researchers came to our community, we didn't want them to simply come to our community and gather data. We wanted them to engage and connect with our community and our water, land, and sky beyond their research. So the different research projects made efforts to connect with our elders, youth, leadership, and staff, and engaged with our school children. They also attended and participated in community events. With the 3 different research projects, we asked that when one researcher came to our community, that they bring the other researchers to assist them. And in that way, create a team to look at things in a more comprehensive manner. I'm getting close to ending, I believe. But what I want to emphasize is our efforts to honor the water is based on the ways of our ancestors and what made them strong. On the Great Plains of North America, there are many tribes that followed the buffalo. We had to find ways to work together and get along for shared prosperity. Now, in the 21st century, there are different peoples, different communities, new governments, new organizations that share our territories. In the distant past, when individuals or communities had issues or problems, we turned to our relatives and neighbors. And so in 2014, that's what we did. We turned to our neighbors and those that shared our territories to work together on the problems that were confronting us back then. We continue to honor the water through continued work with Global Water and the Prairie Water Project, but also with other partners on other environmental and climate matters. So for our ancestors and for us today, alliances, partnership, and friendship are most important. And it's really all about relations and connections between one another as humans, but also between those with common concerns, and especially individual and collective relations with water, land, and sky. So now you know the story about why I was born on a muddy Saskatchewan road in 1956. It brought me here today.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anthony, for reminding us of how important those connections are in relationship with the water and the ancestral knowledge. I would like to now open the floor to Professor Don Martin-Hill, who will share with us for the next 10 minutes, and then we will then open it up to, again, some dialogue with the participants today. Thank you.
Hi, thank you for having this wonderful panel. I could listen to them all day, especially the elders. Mine is going to go in a very different direction. I'm work with elders. My whole career for 30 years has been trying to uphold our ancestral knowledge. And so all the research I've ever done has been driven by elders and what they want and their priorities. And it often takes me into amazing places, as you'll see, because the co-creation of Indigenous water quality tools, as well as Indigenous, the traditional ecological knowledge, they designed all of the elements in there, and health was important, as Judy pointed out. Here at Six Nations, where I live, we're finding, mercury in the tap water that where they use well, but we would never be on any government list for boiled water advisories. So methodology is pretty important to do research, and what are acceptable levels of contamination differ from Health Canada and their testing and our testing. So we're trying to find a way to bring these two worlds together and have the information that our elders want shared. And what they want is relationship building. And that's key. So the challenge for academics like myself is, how do I create meaningful research, not only in the design and implementation, but also in the execution. So they've designed all these elements. This is a shoot that we did in our traditional longhouse for our virtual reality. So talk about that a bit if you want to go. Yeah, we'll try to go through this in 10 minutes. So here at Six Nations, you can see what we were originally held, these lands, which is known as the Haldeman Tract. You can see how much land has been taken from us illegally, as well as the small area that we now have. The researcher, one of the researchers, Charles Delanoy, the chemical engineer, has been looking at our river system here at the Grand River. And as you can see, there's 25 wastewater treatment, effluent discharges, industrial runoff, agricultural runoff. It's pretty contaminated. So we have, because we are near Toronto and Hamilton, as well as, having all of these industries uphill from us, we're kind of like viewed as the dump. All of that drudge comes to our people. And for some reason, I'll let you all decide why, they dug a very deep trench along the reserve. So it's much deeper than off reserve. There's two dams that kind of hold this water dump, is what I refer to it as. So the elders wanted us to educate the community as best we could, not only about the history of the Grand River, our teachings, our culture, why water is essential to our very being. And as Gary had mentioned in closing there, you know, we are one of those species that's at risk. And for some reason, science silos these things off, which doesn't make sense to our people. So we try to integrate health, mental health, everything from birthing center, doing a number of projects, to postnatal health. What is it like to have a baby in a home with no running water? Because that does happen at Six Nations, or contaminated water. So we're looking at everything that the health services wanted, the mental health, and doing a lot of youth training and capacity building was a priority. So I'm going to focus on the tools that we're creating to try to sustain ourselves. Go ahead, Catherine. So we have, as I mentioned, 4 projects all together, wrapping up one of them. And obviously COVID did interrupt that, but part of the implications in that we don't control our waters. So we have United Nations University on board, working with us with, as you heard yesterday from Dr. Bev Jacobs, a law professor, looking at Haudenosaunee laws so that we can not only build capacity, develop data, but create tools, you know, for water sensing, and try to find baseline data so we can find out what do we have left, what did we have, and how can we restore the health integrity of our source water and our drinking water. And we developed a project in a holistic manner, and we explain our project through narratives and storytelling. So I'm going to show you some of the tools, and these were all developed and identified by our traditional leadership as well as the elected leadership, each one having a different need and a different tool that they wanted. So one of the main things is that we do uphold the Sustainable Development Goals, because the idea is that we won't need, the team will leave, and I want to make sure that our people are prepared and have resiliency opportunities. So we do have the water governance team. We have a mental health team that's doing really amazing app work with our Gaiwaneo, our immersion kids, who are kind of like, all my kids went to immersion. They have to learn traditional knowledge. And developing bilingual tools, textbook, and so on. So we have a lot of different components where we're trying to create educational tools to reinvigorate the relationship that the elders so want highlighted, not just research findings, but the relationship. So they identified everything from turtle tagging to doing a mapping project, mapping our waterways, mapping our traditional stories, and creating a platform, ultimately is what we're ended up doing with the 4th grant. Go ahead, Catherine. So we work with the kids. I think that's a common theme I've heard for all 3 days. We work with the STEAM Academy. We also work with the traditional language speaker academy here at Gaiwaneo as a partner, and helping them to identify those stories where they're harvesting, because they're the ones that are going to inherit this. So educating and building capacity and empowering community to not only take heed of what they have left, but how to protect that as best they can. So we're developing a story-based archive that's community guided, and it's geographical information about Six Nations lands, waters, and resources. So everything from our wildlife to our turtle populations to the quality sensing, building sensors, both for tap water, because that's what the community wanted, but also sensors that can go into people's wells and sensors that can go into the river, and it'll be downloaded in an app bilingually that people then can monitor their own waters. I guess they call that citizen science. I would just say it's being prepared for climate change, which we know is going to have quite an impact on Indigenous populations. Go ahead. So developing the data portfolio, we can call it technoscience knowledge. You know, developing technology is where the elders took us, surprisingly. So we partnered with Mohawk College and a number of other digital democracy, geoscience, geomapping. We have a number of different partners and different universities working with us. So building an app both for water monitoring, but also for simulation so that they can get training in water treatment plants. So Six Nations does have a state-of-the-art water treatment plant. They don't have money to run it or to take the water into homes because that was never provided. But we do have a nice treatment plant that doesn't have funding. So one of the ways to help community is to create accredited through Mohawk College and McMaster University so that people that live in isolated communities can learn through simulation, which is quite common. Joypop is another app that's being created. They're actually meeting right now. And they're working closely again with the language speakers, Gaiwaneo, to do a health model, because Joypop is essentially a suicide intervention prevention app that we're modeling our app after to create wellness, because some of the information that we're finding is difficult to hear. And I didn't want to just be the bearer of bad news about our environment, our ecosystem health. So the elders wanted to make sure that the mental health of young people, that they were given every opportunity to be positive in their resilience. And it's working really well. They took this design and created the app with it. And we're almost near the end of that project. Go ahead. Another tool is training accreditation with Indigenous youth, not just from Six Nations, but Indigenous youth in the region. We've partnered with SHAD. We've partnered with a number of other Carolinian forests, and we're trying to engage young people who have ideas about how to address their future, and we're partnering them with mentors and PhD students so that they can take their idea to the next level. And there's awards and accreditation from McMaster University once they submit their projects. So we're just now launching this. Go ahead. The goal is that the networking that privileged people such as myself in academia, we're into all these spaces, but people like Judy, who I admire greatly, and many like her, don't have access to these privileged spaces. And part of our role is connecting these two. So sending youth to United Nations was a huge success. They locked into a network of Indigenous leadership from across the globe. They've been invited to Geneva. They were invited to do the opening of the Youth Climate Summit. So all they needed was that pathway in. So part of our job is creating and building bridges that are then given to the grassroots or community people so that the work they're doing can be elevated and upheld in a sustainable way. So we really focus on youth and children. I'll show just a little bit of the virtual reality. It's a draft, but it gives you a sense of all the dissemination of our research results will be in this virtual reality that we're creating. And it's a 2-year project, and we're only halfway in because of COVID. And it doesn't play well on video, but I think you'll get an idea of things we can cover, and the youth it's kind of got a gaming element to it. So it relates to them learning how to test water, how to use the sensors, and they gain power as they travel down the river of life. So it goes along with Haudenosaunee teachings. Were you able to play that, Catherine?
As she fell, she grabbed strawberries.
It starts with the sky world and the teachings around water.
Sowing the seeds of survival, cultivating the seeds of consciousness, and harvesting the
falling
hope
through
of
the
humanity.
sky. So we're skipping to elements from the sky world to when we established our territory and our foods. All of those things are explained. The role of water as medicine in the sky world
Back at
teaching.
this time here, these leaders were magicians. They had spiritual energy and powers you don't even understand. So we have a society of doctors that's probably as old as that time, and in there, it says they could communicate even with the smallest insects. So it's right in line with our culture. We have actually sound.
So again, this is virtual reality, not video. If you had the goggles and you're able to download it, it would be a different experience. But essentially, the person that is playing the game, we're going to take it into the schools. It's going to be mirrored with a science textbook of Haudenosaunee science and biology. But they're going to learn how to test water, how to monitor water, but done in a way that makes sense to our people. So the Knowledge Center, when you look up, you'll be able to see different elements of our findings, whether it's traditional teachings, wampum belts, to data that we're collecting on water.
Saniut na ni kwai da sanawe chiwa he nanga sat kan ronda ne kan kuio ka sa stasra ne skana san ho nanga na tadina grishrine dong was sanda saniut ka ni kwai da ne tana do ne hoti wa ga handa on was sanda
Yeah, just fast forward a bit.
Kan kuio ka ha ne.
So it'll be bilingual, Mohawk, Cayuga, and English, but in the end, they're going to learn a lot about water and their own culture, as well as non-Indigenous children. The elders wanted them to understand their responsibilities to water and the treaty agreements that their ancestors made with ours. So it has multiple sources. There's also a knowledge center that is being built so that all of the data that we've collected, whether it be digital stories, whether it be water teachings from elders or wampum belts, or the biology and the ecosystem, they'll be able to enter those spaces as well. But they wanted us to do it in virtual reality. So we were like, okay. You never know what elders are going to ask you to do. We also work with young people and students and community members to develop digital stories. These are like 3 to 5 minute teachings. We have some Cree students. Our project was partly with Lubicon, which was cut off because of COVID, but you know, we're trying to get the voices of young people out there and how they feel about their future and the water, and how to protect it and take care of it, both using science. One of the COVID outcomes was that we launched a podcast that is led by youth. Catherine is one of the producers, our project manager, along with Hannah, a master student in engineering, and then Makasha Looking Horse, who's the host. And together we created a forum that is done weekly, and they share both research results, research issues, Indigenous decolonizing research, all the way to findings and what's in our tap water. We work with people in New Zealand, the Amazon, and we have BC and Alaska. So youth that are doing amazing work, like Judy was on, people who are doing amazing work. We wanted to share their inspirational stories so that everybody gets involved in water. We're also developing warrior science model, which speaks more to our young people that, you know, science and knowledge can be used to mobilize a community to build capacity and strength and power in taking control of their future. And that's ultimately what the elders wanted. So we've been trying to build that training in, but again, COVID stopped a lot of our science camps that were listed as warrior science. So there's some of the people. We have our team members presenting, our clan mothers, faith keepers, all sharing water teachings. But again, it just keeps the conversation and engagement with the community going. It's live on air, and there's a lot of questions that community has. So it's been quite successful. We have a big social media presence thanks to our young team members and the youth. And we find that we went from 0 to a couple thousand followers who are very invested now in the issues that Six Nations is dealing with. and building that network and capacity is part of our social media campaign. So all of these tools are meant to do those things, to encourage people to get involved, to understand what's in their water, and to try to restore the health of our rivers. We need the community to mobilize because we're dealing with a lot of issues. I'll be honest with you. I mean, Six Nations is having a COVID spike still. We lost like 10 elders, really important, pivotal elders due to COVID. So we've been hit really, really hard. And we want to make sure that, you know, our people don't feel demoralized when we're giving them climate change and water quality information, but rather empowered and elevate their voice as much as possible. So thank you, Yahweh.
Well, a huge thank you to you, Don, as well as all of our panelists today. I'm an Indigenous health psychologist by training, but I can't tell you how important land and water figure into our view of health and well-being within my own community, but also several communities I work with across Canada, New Zealand, and Australia as well, right, and the US. So I want to say a heartfelt yokoke to each of you who presented today. I definitely see a common thread running through each of the presentations today. And again, you know, it's reminding us of that knowledge and that wisdom around water and how important it is to recognize water as a kin, as a relative. I think as Gary so eloquently stated, you know, it's like a heart. You know, if you cut off one vein, you know, it starts to infect other parts of the body, right? And then as the other panelists have spoken today, I see that as we infect any of our water with these poisons, as Judy reminded us, you know, it hurts all of us in the end, not just the humans, but the animals and the land and the sediment that we got to hear about as well. And I think that's really critical. And then I think, you know, if you have a question, please feel free to go ahead and put it in the question and answer box as well for our panelists. I think, you know, as we're also thinking about this, I just want to bring up the storytelling aspects, right? And a lot of community work that I do revolves around stories and restoring as a part of revitalization. And I was really taken with the innovation as well and the technology that you were able to share with us today, Don. It's amazing to me. We had a prophecy from a Choctaw elder back in the 1940s that said one day the land, it's actually from a grandfather in the 1940s, so even older, said that one day the land will be covered with a web, and you're going to love this web, the elder said. Like, oh, you're going to love it. You're going to be able to know what other people are doing all around the world, and you're going to really enjoy it because you're going to get to learn from other Indigenous people. Well, once the telephone wires got put in, there are a group of Choctaws who said, oh, well, that was the telephone wires. They're like a spider web. And then, of course, you know, now as we're going to this new era, especially during COVID, we realized like, oh, that was actually the web. The World Wide Web is what the elder was talking to us about. So, you know, and as I hear these presentations today, we're all connected via this web. And it's really powerful that we're able to exchange and to learn from each other. And I think especially around water and the health, because no matter where you are in the world, right, we draw a lot of our water, oddly enough, from New Zealand. I went to a spring where Coca-Cola products bottles their water from in great amount. And all of the water around the world is connected. So these have been very powerful and very important panels today. And with that, I will see if we have any questions. The first one is from Kristen Bill, and she was asking, I believe it was for you, Don, what type of sensors and apps you use for the program. I know the virtual reality you were able to go in a bit more, but I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, so there's several apps being made. One is for the sensors. So that's something you'll be able to download to your iPhone or your tablet, and you'll be able to look, and because our people put I know it's terrible. They put bleach because we did health surveys. And as they were collecting water, we developed these health surveys to see how are they using their water? How are they taking care of the wells and a lot of other questions. And we found there's a lot of bleach use in wells. So they wanted us to monitor that. So a PhD student developed where we were just going to start training the health workers and the school teachers and start there so that they could then take these home and they'll be free to the community. The other sensor that we're still developing is the one for the creeks and the river. And we had to wait to get the health data because it's an integrated study. And nobody's ever looked at heavy metals, but because of the health data, we started identifying, well, the elders, that to look for heavy metals. And we were shocked to find mercury at very high levels in tap water, E. coli, bacteria, you name it, because many people are on wells and cisterns. So that sensor can also be used in wells and cisterns, and that'll be looking at heavy metal and whether your water's safe. So again, these are free to the community. We're training Guy Wineo, the kids, because they don't have a big budget, on how to handle, as well as the STEAM Academy, these sensors and also sell them, not for, they're going to be around $30 because most sensors are about $400. So we're trying to make them very accessible, culturally relevant. It's going to be in both Mohawk and Cayuga, so you can download and we're developing the elements table with speakers. So we're trying to integrate our apps with language. That's the common theme. Again, that can be downloaded to the Joypop is already something that's been tried and tested and been very successful in intervening. And why I like the Joypop, I asked her to come on board to help us, is because it had a circle of friends and peers or aunties, so that when a person's feeling really down, that app can tell their friends and alert people. And essentially they found out by the emojis they use, not what they're saying, but what they're not saying in emojis. And they found it to be like a 90% rate of success and intervening. And I thought that made sense for our people because, when we have a high suicide rate. I mean, that is an issue. And what we're finding out in interviewing youth is that, this whole issue of not having access to clean water is devastating to them. It's like they feel a sense of hopelessness and out of control. Like, you can literally go next door and to a white community and they got running water. You walk across the road to Six Nations and they don't. So it's a very, very prominent in their everyday experience that they're not valued in this society. So we didn't realize mental health and anxiety over not just water, but climate change was pretty pervasive. So this app was very helpful, I thought, because I didn't want to give bad news to our young people about the shape of our water. So again, that app is separate and it's geared towards youth specifically. The goal in the long term is to have a consolidated app. And that's what we're looking at now, but it'll also be available on the platform we're designing so that other people can use it and have access to everything we're building. It's not just for Six Nations, it's driven by Six Nations, but it'll be accessible, training tools, the apps, the sensors to anybody who needs them. That's a sustainability piece.
Thank you. I think that answers that. It sounds like it would be transferable then across Indigenous cultures, which was a follow-up question. Oh, wonderful to hear. I'm wondering if the other panelists could talk a little bit more about youth involvement. I know it figured prominently in the work we just heard about with Dawn, but I'm wondering if Tim, Gary, or Anthony, if you've also included youth in some of your projects, or if there's an interest there for the youth to become involved.
I would pass that question to Anthony because I believe that he has been. Let's let Anthony go first on that one.
All right.
Thank you, Tim. Like many First Nations, Indigenous communities across Canada and elsewhere, As I hinted at in some of my words, over the decades, over the generations, we have lost some of that connection to water, land, and sky. So in the last few years, because of climate change, extreme weather, we've been looking for ways to reconnect to the land, to the water, to the sky. And like many First Nations, we now have land-based programming in both of our schools. And for us, on all environment and climate work projects with partners, we look for ways to engage with our school kids, with our youth. When we began to connect with the University of Saskatchewan and the different schools and colleges, we had many visitors from the university. And I would always get them to go into the schools, introduce themselves, who they are, where they're from, why are they in university, what are their plans for the futures. And in that way, hopefully inspire our young people to consider post-secondary studies, post-secondary learning, combined with our recent land-based programming. So to bring together the two ways of knowing, the two ways towards knowledge, to work together.
Thank you. Really important work. Great to hear about the youth. And Tim or Gary, did you have anything to add to that?
I just add that we do have partnerships with the school in Cumberland House. And one thing I've learned, not only in Cumberland House, but other communities where I've worked, is that elders will often tell us that it's extremely important to get the youth involved. And so that there is an imperative definitely to do that. How to engage youth. I mean, I'm seeing what Don's team is doing is really inspiring in terms of, virtual reality. Like that's really impressive. And I think we can learn a lot to try and adapt some of those tools in our situation. Gary, do you want to comment a little bit about in Cumberland House about youth and how they're sort of interacting with the Delta these days?
I've always said that, how we're losing our cultures because of what's happening with the environment and the wildlife and the environment. We're losing our culture, we were losing our ways. I've always said that with the first thing, one of the first things I said to U of S said we need to create curriculums for every school in this planet at the grade level, so we can teach them about what's happening with the environment and why it's happening, because we're not getting the teaching at home anymore. And that's not just the Aboriginal people, it's all race. So we need to start something at the school level so they will learn from the school and they will be better stewards into the future than what we were.
Quite often, when we gather and talk about certain matters in preparation for the future, there's a chair missing at the table, and that's our youth. We need to find ways to include them, give them voice, listen to them, and act on them. Dawn, I'm very happy to see that whether it's climate or COVID, the mental health of our young people is very important. This may be something that we have to deal with for years to come. We don't know how our young people are reacting to COVID, climate change, water insecurity. So the mental health aspect is very important today and will be even more important tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you for that. I would like to take credit for all that great thinking, but none of it was mine. I have to really give it to the clan mothers and faith keepers and the chiefs and the traditional knowledge holders. They designed even the virtual reality. Like, I know nothing about that. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now. So luckily Mohawk College had a brand new center and we gave them a grant. We don't have enough money to do what we'd like to do. It's about $500,000 to do a splashy one. But you know, it's a living archive. So the platform will have also kind of monitoring the mapping that we're doing, the digital mapping can also house that health data so that we know how our youth are feeling. So we're just trying to figure out the technology and how to keep, not only monitor our waters, but like the Maori that I work with showed me how to monitor ourselves and how we're feeling about. And what they found in New Zealand was that when they were seeing a lot of dead animals, dead dolphins or whales, it really impacted and suicide ideations would spike. So we know that our youth are rooted in the ecosystem. And if the ecosystem is unhealthy and suffering, they feel that. And we actually have a young person, our youth lead, who did interviews with young people. And right now it's called Ecological Grief. She wants to change that, but it's about this deep sadness that we've been hearing a lot about, that people don't seem to care about what's happening to their future, their environment. So, you know, I think mental health is going to be not just Native kids. I teach at McMaster. I can tell you, it's all kids. They're feeling it. So hopefully the tools we develop are usable, not just for us. They just happen to be holistic and Indigenous science based, but available to everybody, because we know we have a problem. We have a future that we need to prepare them for, like climate change preparedness is the next phase of the virtual reality, so that they understand, like in Alberta, you know, do they know the fires that are coming? Does that data that is generated by scientists reach these communities? It doesn't. So the goal for me and GWF have been pushing hard is make this available to our people and give them the resources to use their traditional knowledge to address these, because we've been left out of those conversations. We're not in climate change water preparedness. That's for provinces, municipalities. We're not sitting at the table. So we're at risk, and the United Nations has been a strong advocate. And so I think these are all very important for everybody's mental health for climate change. It's a youth-driven one, but I think it'll be used by more than youth.
If I could share a very short story. 150, 200 years ago, on the Great Plains, the Plains bison defined who we were as a people and taught us to live with water, land, and sky. We've not been connected with Brother Buffalo for over 150 years. In recent years, we've been working with a number of organizations, including Parks Canada, to protect a herd of wild buffalo that makes their home in Prince Albert National Park. So we've established a Guardians project. We prefer to call it a stewardship program. We want to share stewardship of that herd with others. And we have young people, recent high school graduates that are our stewards for that herd of wild plains bison. We want our young people to learn the landscape that the buffalo call home and learn the nature of the creature, so that in the future, when we're ready, we want to prepare landscape and bring Brother Buffalo back to our lands to be with us as we move towards self-determination and become self-governing people once again. We need that keystone species beside us, much like we all need water. And we want our young people to be our guides. and bring the Western and traditional ways of knowing together for a shared good future.
Thank you, Anthony, for that. And thank you, Gail, for that question as well. That's a beautiful story that you've told us of how it's connected to colonialism, the removal of the bison from the people, and then how you're moving to reconnect. And I think in each of the panels, you've each spoken about this revitalization and this reconnection, and how important it is not just for your personal communities, but also for everyone, in Canada and everyone across the world, especially as we're facing climate change. And we're so intimately connected, our health and well-being, to the environment. It just makes sense that we need to consider this as humans, yet for our species' sake, I believe several of you said. So as human beings, this is very important work. If it looks like there are no other questions, and I know we're on a bit of a schedule, so any last remarks from any of the panelists before I close? Right. Well, I know you've spoken quite a bit today.
If I may.
Oh, please. Yes. Go ahead, Anthony.
We want others to walk with us. We want others to walk with us as we reconnect with water, land, and sky.
Thank you.
I'll just
And
say for Judy, she had to leave. She said somebody was in distress.
Oh, okay.
So she's apologizing for not staying on, but I just thought I'd share that. Our elders are really busy.
Yes. Yes, thank you for that. And they did post the her website link in the chat. So if you're interested, hopefully anyone that's watching right now can go to the chat link and pull that up as well. But we're very honored that she took time out during her day to meet with us.
Yeah, she's amazing.
So I want to remind everyone that the GWF Science meeting will come to a close with a great panel discussion on collective solutions to Canadian water security. And it's going to be back on the main live feed starting at 3:15 Eastern. So hopefully you'll have some time to stretch, to get up to walk around. We talk about the importance of our environment and well-being, and it's kind of the work that I do is looking at land-based healing and how we are healthier when we're outside. So I'm going to encourage everyone to step outside if you can, get some sunshine, or just take in some fresh air before the closing panel. So huge thank you to all of our panelists, and much admiration for all the very important work that you're doing, not just for your community, but all of society as we work to help our water and our situation. So, Yokoke.
Howie.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.